Hello and welcome to the launch of 10 Key Insights on Sustainable Diet. I'm really excited to be here today to launch this report. I'm Amy Fetzer, Head of Research and Analysis at Footprints Intelligence, and I really enjoyed researching and writing this report because sustainable diets is something I'm really super passionate about, and so I'm hugely excited to share the results with you. Now, this is designed to act as a companion to the Actions on Sustainable Diets report that we brought out a few years ago. Action on Sustainable Diets is a really good how-to guide to how to approach reviewing sustainable diets within your organization, but 10 Key Insights on Sustainable Diets brings it up to date with all the stuff that's changed in that space, from cultured meat to sustainable to regenerative agriculture. There's a whole lot of movements. We wanted to update everybody with where the industry was today, and the two are great companion pieces to each other. We are hugely grateful to Nestlé Professional. Without the support of far-reaching companies like Nestlé, we just couldn't produce these important works. So thank you very much to them. Today, I've got 15 minutes to whiz through the key highlights. And those who know me know this is going to be a challenge to limit myself to this much time, but I will do my very best. And then we have a really fantastic panel. We've got 30 minutes with Bob Gordon from Zero Carbon Forum, Ruth Edge from KFC, and Anna Collins from Nestlé Professional. And I think we're going to have some really interesting and thought-provoking discussion then. So without further ado, I want to get cracking. Of course, as you know, on the YouTube, you can put any questions you have in the comments there, and it will be fed through to me, and I can go through them with the panel. So first of all, the first insight is managing risk is essential in an era of crisis. This is because, I'm sure, as many of you know, agriculture accounts for a quarter of global emissions and uses 50% of habitable land and 70% of global freshwater. In the UK, it accounts for 35% of emissions within our borders, and meat and dairy are the worst offenders. So this is why addressing the impacts of food is at the heart of tackling climate change. Now, since we did our Action on Sustainable Diets report, the concept of sustainable diets within the food service environment has really evolved. It used to be very focused, operators used to think about it very focused on local and seasonal, but now people have kind of broadened their understanding and definition to be much closer to the UN definition, including low waste, plant-based products produced using agroecological practices. And that is really fantastic. There's a much greater understanding and embracing of genuine sustainability principles. But with the clock ticking to achieve tangible action to avert climate catastrophe, sustainable diets are a really key, important part of this. So Bob, when I spoke to him, Bob Gordon, who we're going to see on the panel later, he said, in an era of crisis, climate, cost of living, COVID conflict, you need to manage your risk. And with scope 3 dominated by ingredients, you need to detect those risks and choose a resilient menu. So that means hospitality and food service businesses need to ask themselves, what are our short-term supply chain disruption risks? What are our long-term supply chain risks? What are the long-term risks to the business from changing diets and changing dietary preferences towards more sustainable options and more plant-based options? What about these increasing regulations as things like more emitting ingredients like meat and dairy become subject to those? The answers to all of these questions, which will be different for every business, will help you design resilient food offers. And the fabulous thing is as you can see, so we did so the research for this report included speaking to a wide range of industry insiders with real insight, but also we did some consumer polls of around 1,000 people and to find out what they thought about these issues when they were eating out. And basically 70% of them really see that link between food and the climate crisis. So they said, do you think changing diets to eat less meat, dairy and more plant-based foods is important? And 77% said it was, yes, it was. So your customers are on your side for this. Alongside this is all the government targets. So we need an increase of 30% in fruit and veg to meet the Eat Well recommendations, a 50% increase in fibre to meet the Scientific Advisory Committee recommendations, 25% reduction in high fat, sugar, salt products, and a 30% reduction in meat to meet the government's legal commitments to achieve net zero by 2050, and 30% keeping 30% of UK land protected for nature by 2030. So these are not nice to haves. They, to meet those climate targets, we've got to sort of change diets. And this is why this great quote that came from Henry Dimbleby, where he said to me, moving towards a plant-based diet is the single biggest thing operators can do to minimize the impacts. Ask, how can I buy 30% less meat? So we're not saying no to meat, of course not, but we're just saying looking at reformulating things in quite a substantial way to help this shift towards more climate-focused menus. Insight 2 is radical change is needed. We've obviously set the scene for why we need that radical change, because existing food systems just place literally finite limits on the reductions that can be achieved. So Dimbleby's report, the food strategy report, concluded we need a long-term shift in our food culture. It talks about changing the way we use land, reintroducing forgotten wisdom, but whilst also using AI and robots. And he also flagged the need for businesses such as hospitality and food service operators and the manufacturers such as Nestlé that supply them, which everybody is doing a really good job on, to innovate and creating new food products and reformulating old ones so they do less damage. Essentially, we have 18 years to achieve our net zero by 2040 target. So we can't just keep gently encouraging people to eat more plants and less meat. We haven't got time for dietary preferences to change. So we need transformational changes in the way we produce food. So what does that mean? Well, lots of advocates think this could mean, we're having cultured meat, milk produced through precision fermentation, fruit and vegetables produced through vertical farming, and potentially feeding livestock on insects which have been fed on food waste in old shipping containers. Now, advocates might say these are the only way to provide nutrients at a scale to feed a growing population, but is the public supporting? And the wonderful thing is our consumer panels said resoundingly, yes. First of all, 60% of them would choose, 66% of them would choose an eating venue just because it serves items with lesser impacts on the planet. But also there are a lot more people are coming around to the idea of these alternative food sources. There's 40%, which is quite a substantial chunk, said they would eat cultured meat if it was on a restaurant menu. And 55% said they'd eat a brownie made with insect flour. So people are becoming more open as they realize the impact this can play in helping to meet climate targets. The next one is about embracing regenerative agriculture. Now, this is defined by Groundswell as any kind of farming which at the same time improves the environment. And it includes things like not disturbing the soil, keeping the soil surface covered, keeping living roots in the soil. And it's getting lots of support from hospitality and food service businesses up and down the supply chain. Compass has got a target of 70% of fresh meat and dairy and veg will be sourced by regenerative agriculture by 2030. Nestlé is investing $960 million into it. It's really being embraced. But one of the challenges are sorting the truly green from the green washers. So things like the global farm metric are hoping to resolve these issues. And food service can help by asking suppliers to get behind this metric. For example, Bidfood is piloting with a supplier at an operator's behest to see if they can get this metric working and helping to identify what's really happening at farm level. In the meantime, it's really important for operators and suppliers and distributors to build relationships with those producers and all the players along the supply chain, so you can prioritize those producers who are taking action for those who don't, as currently regeneratively farmed products are typically mixed in with conventional when they're sold, so you can't identify them easily unless you really know your sources. Another insight was that the need for hospitality and food service to support better data. As many of you will know, scope 3 emissions are dominated by food. Typically 80% of ingredients, typically 80% of the emissions on scope 3 come from ingredients, so they're integral to the climate crisis. But cost, complexity and poor availability of data means that most calculations rely on average emissions data for the country. And even those who have done the maths, like the producers who have, it might be hard to find them because distributed databases often don't highlight credentials and have a way to identify those people. So people like CH&Co are one of the first operators to utilize Authenticate as one of the footprinting offerings out there to try and help make it more systematic and streamlined. So it's really great for people to get behind similar systems that everyone's asking the same questions. And Kate Nichols, when we spoke to her, she said, we've got to exert this collective pressure on the supply chain, better impact data, so we're all asking the same questions in the same way. And people like RAP's Scope 3 Protocol, the Global Farm Metric, Zero Carbon Forum, they're all really powerful in this regard because they help make everybody ask the same questions and do things in the same way, so it's simpler for everybody to comply. And regulation is going to come, so those who are ahead will benefit. Another key point very much tied in with this is the need to share costs. So getting the Scope 3 data costs a lot, but currently clients and customers aren't particularly prepared to pay more, which means operators can't pay the distributors more, which means the distributors can't pay the producers more. So we have a bit of a vicious circle. So we need to have a change in this way of doing things, so that everybody is supporting the costs that come along. And sometimes it can also be supporting them through providing expertise and resource. So for example, Coke is supporting Net Zero now to help smaller operators access, make the transition to net zero through protocols. Oh, sorry, my remote clicker's not working. There we go. Okay, insight 6 is sustainable diets are the more norm. Sustainable diets are mainstream. We now need to make them the norm. Now, our research found that 72% of citizens eat veggie or vegan meals or snacks when they're eating out, but 61%, so that's nearly 2/3, want more veggie and vegan choices on the menu. In fact, Lumina Intelligence also found that 33% of mains out on the ground now are vegetarian. So there is a lot of opportunity here. So operators really must make sure they have a good range to meet that and drive that need. And I think we'll hear a little bit later from Nestlé on some of the things they're doing to drive that. And we can use things like pricing, signposting, placing, implements, incentive, all of these can help. And for example, Compass saw a 10 to 21% uplift in some of their plant-based options by using appealing concepts like Buddha bowls, top salads, and a Good Stuff brand. So it is really possible. Insight 7 is to join the move away from meat and dairy. Now, plant-based proteins on average are responsible for 70 times fewer greenhouse gases and 150 times less land. Although the UK is kind of half the global average, but that's still pretty chunky figures. So we talked about the UK food strategy and how it needs to increase fruit and veg by 30% and reduce meat by 30% by 2032, which is actually only 10 years to meet these government carbon and diet related targets. So we've got to use the tools at our disposal, so nudges. So there's the Burger King in Vienna was asking people normal or with meat. There's a study with baristas at Bath University where they're saying, what milk would you like with that, to try and drive people to more plant-based options. And we have people like Compass and Sodexo making quite chunky targets of sort of 40% or 33% of switching to plant-based by sort of in the next 3 to 7 years. So there's really good stuff happening within the industry. Really important alongside all of this is ensuring that meat substitutes are healthy. Brands should expect a lot more scrutiny. Consumers expect plant-based options to be healthy, but they aren't always. And it is hard when they're often replacing the more unhealthy options on the menu. But it is possible to do it. Nestlé Professional have avoided red traffic lights on their Garden Gourmet range and really worked hard to produce a similar profile. And research done by the academic community has shown that plant-based can have high protein, good amino acids, low fat. There is some more research needed on gut absorption. And of course, like meat, you can have issues with toxins and carcinogens when they're cooked at high temperatures. So more research is needed to build that transparency and trust, and to make people, enable people to really to make those healthier choices, and to ensure that everybody knows what's happening and what it means when they choose different choices. Another insight that came through is to focus on familiar favorites. Dishes that are the most successful, we heard from all of the people that we engaged with and all the research that we did, are the ones that are new spins on familiar faved, with reduced meat or even being entirely veggie or vegan. There's a great editorial from David Burrows on this that came out on the Footprint website last week, actually. But basically, they really, everyone told us that those ones, spins on traditional faves, had the highest plant-based sales. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, just make people familiar faves that people are comfortable with, and that will really help to shift diets. Lastly, 69% of people in our research want to hear from pubs and bars about what they're doing to tackle food waste. And that is really key, because every kilo of food waste is associated with 3.39 kilos of carbon. So every single bite of food that's wasted means all those impacts were for nothing. It's really low-hanging fruit. And as Kate Nichols from UK Hospitality said, it really the focus on cost control currently really adds grist to the mill in terms of the benefits of tackling food waste. Now, RAT recommends a target, measure, act approach because kitchens just don't see waste at all. They tell you they don't have it. But as soon as they start measuring it, it makes the invisible visible, and people tend to spontaneously start taking the actions within their own business to tackle it. And there's lots of free Guardians of Grub tools and training available to do that. So food waste is a really key one. We can, whatever's on the plate, let's not waste any of those ingredients at any point in the supply chain. Now, oh my God, I've pretty much done it. I'm really excited. I've managed to stick myself to 15 minutes. So now we have our fabulous panel to talk about all these different issues, because as I said, I've only managed to skate across all of them. So if we could have the panel slide up, that would be great. And there we go. Yeah, that's fabulous. And I would like to introduce you to everybody. So we've got on the right there next to me, we've got Ruth Edge, who's the head of supply chain sustainability at KFC. Thank you very much, Ruth. We've got Anna Collins, who's the nutrition manager from Nestlé, and Bob Gordon, who's a director from Zero Carbon Forum. So we're hopefully going to get to talk about each of the 10 different insights, but we might not quite get through everything. But and as I said, if there's any questions as we go along, please just do send them on the YouTube chat. So the first insight is managing managing risk crisis. Oh my God. Managing crisis is essential in an era of risk. Sorry, everybody, I'm not quite 100% today. So we talk about how with Scope 3 emissions dominated by purchased goods and services, how adopting sustainable diet principles enables you to do this. So Bob, if you could start us off by saying, through your work both previously as head of Doing the Right Thing at Nando's and also as director of Zero Carbon Forum, how are you seeing operators changing their menus to improve product resilience and sustainability credentials?
Yeah, I think most start with sustainability. It's the more obvious place to start on your journey, and certainly where the narrative has started. But I think we're seeing increasing awareness of the importance of resilience, particularly in the last 6 months in the wake of the extreme weather we had this summer. Some disruptions to food supply chains at 1.2 degrees of warming. A couple of examples spring to mind. Tomato concentrate, because tomato production was interrupted in Spain by extreme weather, and chicken production in the UK because of the temperature of some of the sheds, and certainly some of the older sheds were harder to manage. So there were some disruptions to supply. So there's this increasing awareness of, okay, so this isn't about me being responsible and building brand points or even getting to net zero. It's about me having continuity in my business. There's a lot of correlation between the two, and I think particularly when you look at something like regenerative agriculture, if you can move to more sustainable ways of producing food, you also build resilience. And an obvious example there would be if you have better soil health, then you are more resilient to drought. Seeing lots and lots of examples of this in the work that we're doing with our members. As you say, I used to work at Nando's. Nando's has been looking at sustainable and resilient chicken for the best part of a decade. Some really good stuff coming out of McDonald's have set a target to have a regenerative agriculture initiative in all of their priority supply chains by 2025. The likes of WSH working with smaller suppliers. Honest Burgers putting 30% of their beef now from regenerative sources. So you're seeing lots of this begin to happen throughout lots and lots of businesses. And as I say, both a lens of sustainability and resilience, both important as part of that narrative.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Bob. And Ruth, it would be great to get a perspective from KFC in the coalface. What's your approach to identifying and tackling risks related to your menus and ingredients? How are you working with the supply chain on these issues?
Yeah, so we are, I wouldn't go as far as to say at the beginning of our journey, but we're certainly not as developed as some brands that are out there in relation to this. We have identified where those key areas are for us. And identified some strategic plans in terms of the way in which we can deal with that. So a good example of that is within our chicken production. and looking at moving towards sustainable soy. And we've signed up to the UK Soy Manifesto, which will sort of stipulate that any soy that's either embedded or as an ingredient within our supply chain is deforestation and conversion free. So not only do you have the benefit in terms of obviously the deforestation and looking after our landscapes, but also there is a carbon benefit with that as well. And that's one of sort of the more significant levers you can pull within the poultry production space. We're also working with suppliers to understand what they're doing currently and how we can support that. And likewise, how we can sort of go on that journey together and sort of bring together those action plans, both from us as a customer perspective, but then from a supplier perspective as well. And kind of got embedded sort of points within the journey, sort of as check-in and action plans aspects within there. But I'm sure this will be a theme that comes out in many of these questions. Absolutely, we can't do that in isolation. So we're also reaching out to other brands and through forums such as the one that obviously Bob's involved in and others, to see where collaboration can play a really strong part in that. Whilst we can have an impact as that a brand individually, actually a lot of this stuff needs to be tackled from various different aspects of the supply chain, and different people aligning to have similar specifications or requirements or whatever it might be to make that really impactful change.
I think that's a really, really good point, Ruth, and one that we'll return to in the support better data section as well. So thank you, because that's all really valid points. Anna, the report also focuses on the need for skills for all the chefs in the kitchen when they were talking about changing the sort of composition of some of these dishes and rebalancing them, that we need to upskill our menu developers and our chefs. Could you talk to me a little bit about the work Nestlé is doing to help support that transition?
Yes, Nestlé Professional are really passionate about supporting our chefs and helping to provide resources to upskill them in this area of plant-based. So we've got a team of chefs at Nestlé Professional who develop a lot of plant-based recipes to support our products. And these recipes, lots of them are available on our website as a free resource. And what's really great is that we have our team of nutritionists here work with the chefs to develop the recipes so that they're really providing a nutritionally balanced plant-based meal, more aligned with wider sustainability or sustainable diet goals. So, for example, we really look to include at least 2/3 of vegetables for each portion in our recipes. We aim to meet salt reduction targets for out of home. We look at traffic light thresholds, so aiming to be amber and green for salt and sugar and saturated fat. And we also have quite a lot of free resources available on our Nestlé Professional website that can help with areas like designing a plant-based menu, how do you promote your plant-based dishes on a menu, even looking at consumer trends, so what are they looking for in plant-based dishes, all the way through to resources on minimising food waste and how do you evaluate that, and what measures can you put in place. So all of these are available on our website, and we also are involved in putting reports together. So we share these, for example, a few years ago we had our Balancing Plates report, which really looked at, again, what were consumers looking for when it comes to sustainability in out of home, what did they want to see on the menus, how can digital play a role in this space, and we try to share this with our customers so that, to everybody else's point, it's really about collaborating together to help our customers meet the needs for consumers.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Anna. We've just had a question in for you, Ruth, around are there any plans to try and switch to legumes as opposed to using soy?
Legumes as opposed to legumes.
yeah. Sorry.
So definitely alternatives, protein sources is something we're looking at, and we are exploring with our suppliers. So whether that be the use of legumes, so peas, pulses, whatever that might be, or whether that is looking at insects as an opportunity within there. I know there's quite a lot of interesting research that's being done. Morrison's have got a fantastic trial that they're doing on the egg production, where they're basically taking food waste and then producing insects within, it's actually on egg production, where they are then producing the insects and feeding them on the food waste that's coming from the retailer, and then feeding that back to chickens. At the moment, there's some challenges around regulation, both within the UK and Europe, in relation to feeding insects back to poultry, and not being able to do it when the insects have been ground and made into a meal, only being able to do it when they're live. So there's some bureaucratic aspects and some regulations changes that's needed, but absolutely we see alternatives to soy as part of the solution, but possibly not the sole solution. So we would want to use both pulses and insects to reduce the use of soy, but we still see that there probably would be a place within the poultry feed diet for soy to be present, and where that is happening, that needs to be responsibly sourced.
Perfect. That's absolutely fantastic. So insight 2 is radical change is needed. Now, obviously, Dimbleby, Monbiot and others say we need to create a long-term shift in food culture. And we have, this 18 years to achieve our net zero target, and gently encouraging people, it's not going to do it in time. So Bob, how could the food system be transformed to feed a growing population whilst dramatically reducing negative impacts and emissions?
Yeah, I think to the same point that Ruth has just made about chicken feed, there are some immediate things that you can do, and there are some long-term things that you can do, and the long-term things aren't necessarily viable today. I mean, in terms of immediate things, there's marketing of vegetarian alternatives. The vast majority of people now have good vegetarian offers. It's about marketing them. It's about working to reduce the impact of the meat and dairy products and all of the products that you do serve. But over the longer term, I think there's some really exciting stuff in terms of radical change. I agree with Dimbleby and Monbiot on this, and I see that change happening quite fast. Talking of insects, we had a meeting yesterday where we invited some guys from Yumbug to come and serve us some crickets, and lots of energy in the room around that. Really delicious product, and as they were explaining what they do and why they do it, talk of radically reduced environmental footprint of producing food with insects, literally to the tune of thousands of times more efficient, radically eliminating agricultural land, water use, radically reducing carbon emissions. That happens with insects, which will only ever be a proportion of our diet, and won't entirely replace the amount of meat that we consume. But when you then consider the likes of cultured meat and precision fermentation, there's a massive opportunity here. Cultured meat has been legal in Singapore for a couple of years. They just made it legal in the USA last week, I think. So that's a huge step forward. It's not any old state. It's the United States of America. This is a huge step in that transition. Precision fermentation is already legal in the States, where they serve this particular ice cream, Perfect Day, that is phenomenally successful. And we're going to see that industry grow very quickly. Lots of interest here amongst our members. We're taking them off to a cultured meat producer in the first quarter of next year. So lots of interest and some practical opportunities to really get involved with that. And again, certainly with cultured meat, you start to reduce your impact by thousands of times.
I know that Nestlé is doing some work in the cultured meat space. Could you sort of tell me a bit about what's going on there and how you could see that becoming actually a product that might actually hit the restaurant menus anytime soon?
Yeah, so as one of the world's leading food and drink manufacturers, I think Nestlé has really got a responsibility to use its research capabilities and resource to look into some of these emerging areas, as you call them, more radical areas, and emerging technologies with, in particular, the future meat alternative space. So while at the moment our focus is really on expanding our portfolio of plant-based alternatives, we are also looking at, or we have partnerships with external companies and looking into some of these emerging areas like the cultured meat, with the aim that we'll end up with an animal-friendly alternative. I think it's really exciting to understand the potential. And as Bob says, it is almost growing by the day in different markets. In particular, we're interested to see whether we really can end up with something that's nutritious, sustainable, and also that really is close to meat in terms of taste, flavours, texture. So it's providing quite a different avenue for consumers in terms of a meat alternative. As we've touched on, it won't necessarily be the replacement. I think it's going to have a role alongside some of the other meat alternatives that we're discussing. And I think it is still early days with the cultured meat, and certainly in the UK, it may be some time before we've got regulatory approval here. And I also think it's really interesting to see how consumers will respond once it does become more available. So it was great, Amy, to see in your report that actually there is a vast proportion of consumers saying that they would be willing to try it. So really exciting area, maybe some time off for the UK, but definitely projects underway to try and get a high quality product.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anna. Moving on to the insight 3 about embracing regenerative agriculture. Ruth, you talked a bit already about how you're working with your supply chain to incorporate regenerative farming principles. Is there anything else, any advice you can give for the industry about how, others can follow who are less, maybe less farther along in their journey?
I think it's about understanding A, what the current situation is, and B, sort of instilling in a non-patronising way that learning across the supply chain. We've got some really great examples of suppliers that are doing things, particularly within our potato sector, around sort of embedding carbon back into the soil and ensuring that is as efficient as possible and as sort of carbon neutral as possible within that space. I also think that, as I said right at the beginning, our supply chains for KFC are not individual. Our supply chains are shared amongst a number of other operators, both within the UK and beyond. So that alignment around not being too specific about what we mean by regenerative agriculture is really important, and really important that we collectively come together to sort of understand what we mean about that, as opposed to sort of going down a niche particular angle. I think you mentioned in your introduction, there is quite a wide definition for regenerative agriculture, and a lot of that is sort of still being defined as technology moves forward, and sort of data comes out from those farms that are trialing different initiatives as well. So I think to be open-minded in that space and not be too clinical about what that means is quite important, particularly with people in different geographical areas and dealing with different land and different crops and that kind of side of things.
Thank you, that's really helpful. The Insight 4 talks about supporting better data. Bob, the Zero Carbon Forum stats about how food accounts for over 80% of HAF's Scope 3 emissions is one I'm always banding around because it's so powerful. But how do you get data, with data on emissions relating to actual, so how do we get data on emissions that relate to actual products to enable buyers to choose between apparently like products? It's really challenging at the moment. So how can people within the HAF's value chain support better data so they can really see these potatoes have been regeneratively farmed versus the ones that haven't, when everything gets mixed together?
Look, this is a journey, right? When I started at Nando's as sustainability manager in 2012, we were still talking about CSR and corporate social responsibility. We weren't talking about doing a footprint, let alone getting granular data about particular products in our supply chain. When we did first do our footprint in 2015, 2016, it was a real surprise to us that such a large proportion of the footprint was in the supply chain. Today, 95% of our members have done a footprint, including single sites. Everyone's well aware that more than 50% of your footprint is going to be in your supply chain. We've got increasingly good conversion factors. We've got alliance now behind agreed set factors in the conversion factors that RAB have produced. There's more and more life cycle analyses being done all the time. If you think about that journey over the last 10 years, we've come a phenomenal distance and we're getting better and better data all of the time. Lots of people now looking at, well, if I look at my top 10 products and I want really good data on those, then I'll have that conversation with my supplier. So there's more work being done individually with suppliers. There's better data out there. Suppliers have greater pressure on them to do that assessment themselves now and do it in a way where they can provide that data, not just to hospitality, but also to retail. And certainly the retailers asking the same questions and needing to get that kind of data out their suppliers. So that data is getting better. It's the collaborative approach, both from hospitality and from retail, and the work that RAP do with Courtauld, that enable us all to align on the things that we're asking for, the way that we want that data, the way that we all use the same data sets. So yes, there's a lot further to go. Yes, data is a problem, but we're moving incredibly quickly and our data sets are getting much, much better all of the time.
Well, that kind of moves us on to the cost, the Insight 5 about sharing costs. This data has a lot of money. What, do you have a comment on how we can address that issue, the cost issue, and who pays, and how we can make it less painful for everyone to pay?
Yeah, it certainly is a problem, and certainly now, this, certainly for the sector, access to capital is more challenging. Doing any kind of in-depth trials, and certainly when you're looking at something like regenerative agriculture, your trial needs to go on for a few years. Your research is a longitudinal study, so it's not a cheap piece of work to do, and your results will get better over time as you invest in your soil habits. So yes, we need better access to money to be able to fund those kinds of changes. The best way to do that is collaboratively. We're seeing our members wanting to get the same things out of their suppliers. So we've put together a supplier engagement action group where we're coming together to ask, what are the things we want to know from our suppliers? What are the consistent questions that we want? What's the data points that we need? How are we going to measure those? What are we going to do with that data once we've got it? So are we then going to work with RAP to share that data to improve that availability for everybody across the sector? So I think the sector actually collaborates very, very well. I think we want to see everybody do well. I think that as smaller players, we have less influence on our supply chain individually, and we know we have a much, much better opportunity to get better data, better consistency when we work together. So certainly what we're seeing is collaboration. We can't talk highly enough about the work that RAP are doing in terms of improving data, and a desire to work together to move the entire sector to see a good result.
That's fantastic.
I hope you don't mind me popping in there as well. I would echo exactly what Bob said in relation to RAP, but also say that this is a journey, and particularly around the scope 3 aspect at the moment, we're all still defining. There are definitions in there that have been kind of clearly set out, but we're still defining what some of that scope is, and where that starts and stops, and what data has the most impact within there, and ensuring that there is consistency in that data. As I'm sure you'll all be aware, in terms of the calculators that are used at a farm level, there can be wide differences in terms of an individual farm, depending on the carbon calculator that they're using and what that end figure is for them. So there's what I'm saying is we're still, as an industry, in relation to scope 3, right at the beginning of that journey, and there's a huge amount of work to do, but that collaboration, and particularly that work that's being done by RAP, is absolutely crucial in that space, in order for that to be driven forward and for that to be effective for brands and businesses.
So the key messages is the collaboration, the coming together, the using these frameworks that a lot of time and effort's been put into to make sure there's no duplication of effort, and people are being able to kind of all pull together and ask for the same data in the same way, and you can just do it once. Is that good?
And it's that consistency. I mean, we're seeing it with lots of sectors. So in conversations we're having with the dairy sector, Dairy UK pulling together to get consistency in the way that their farmers are all producing their footprints. So there's a consistency of methodology, consistency of understanding of what levers you can pull, who's pulled what lever, what impact that's had. Lots of sectors are really coming together on this. It is I think in many instances, pre-competitive, because we recognise the importance of the journey that we're all on.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Well, I think the good thing is, as you say, there's been a lot of progress made. I think it's just really important that we don't do things too incrementally because of the urgency of the situation. Like you say, we've got 10 years to meet various targets, 18 to meet others. We've got to keep up the momentum and get everybody, definitely testing, doing it all right, but making sure we don't feel that we can do it too slowly.
And not be stifled by the unknown as well, Amy. A lot of stuff we just don't know, and not be stifled by that and mean that there's no action. That's really important.
Exactly. So we've got to test, do it scientifically, but make sure we aren't hampered by all the unknowns either. So moving on to insight 7, I've skipped over 6 because I think we've covered a lot of the elements there. Joining the move away from meat and dairy. So the National Food Strategy noted that a 30% reduction in meat is required to meet the government's carbon emission reduction targets. And I mentioned some of the targets that businesses are making to increase their plant base. But Ruth, it'd be really great to get a perspective from a business like KFC, where meat is such a key part of the offering. How are you able to support that transition and still maintain your very unique business proposition?
Yeah, so you've clearly identified that chicken is in our name and is obviously a relatively key ingredient in terms of both what our customers expect us to sell, but also of what we're sort of offering as well. However, we do think that having a meat-free offering is absolutely crucial to the business. And we were one of the first QSR businesses to bring forward a vegan corn product. So we have a meat-free corn burger, which is available to customers coming in. That was originally put on as a limited time offer in our menus, but is now a permanent fixture in restaurants up and down the country for people to buy into. I think the most important thing for us is for that offering to be appealing for those people that want to make the choice to eat meat-free. I'll be really honest, probably as a brand, we are not appealing necessarily to vegans as an offering, but equally, we want people to feel comfortable in that environment and to be able to have a product that they're able to buy. As it stands, we've not set any target in relation to being meat-free. What we're focusing on is reducing the emissions that are coming from chicken as it stands at the moment, whilst still maintaining a really tasty, really appealing offering for those people that want to make that choice and be very much led by the customer in that regard, so that anyone who does want to eat meat-free feels completely comfortable in a KFC surrounding and with the products that we've got on offer.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a pragmatic approach for a brand such as yourselves. It's a challenging situation, but maybe one day we'll see some cultured chicken on there as well, and that might be a way to transition the brand more fully.
Yeah, I think that could be, long term be an option for us, and something we, isn't being ruled out by any means at all. At the moment, all of our chicken pieces are whole pieces of meat as opposed to processed product. So that will probably be one of the last products that come through in terms of cultured meat. But I don't think we're not as a brand ruling that out by any means at all. And that's definitely something we'll be sort of keeping an eye on the market and the technology as it progresses to ensure that, if we were to go down that route, it is delivering for customers and still sort of providing that taste aspect that is required from the brand.
So we've got a few more minutes left, so we're going to just move on to talk about the importance that meat substitutes are healthy. There's a lot of nervousness around that. There's a lot of complexities in this issue. Anna, maybe you could talk to us as somebody who's been very heavily involved in the development of meat alternatives. What are the considerations, and is it possible? How can consumers navigate it, and is it possible to create meat alternatives that still can avoid those red traffic lights on the package?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Amy, that it can be quite difficult to know if your plant-based alternative on the menu is in fact offering a healthier alternative. And this is an area that I'm really passionate about, because I think while there are some great plant-based products out there, there are also some that are operating under this health halo of plant-based and potentially not really delivering to consumers' expectations that they're getting a healthier choice when they're choosing the plant-based dish. But I do think there are some ways to help people be more savvy when it comes to identifying this. So for the consumer, I think it's important to step back and look at the dish that the product is in. So I often use the example of hamburgers, where it's all very well if you've got a nutritious plant-based burger, but if it's sitting on a plate that's loaded with salty fries and mayonnaise and ketchup and a sugary white bun and, all the trimmings, then is it really fitting in with a sustainable diet and the wider principles? So that's one consideration to think about. And then we've had the mandatory introduction of calorie labelling in out-of-home. So it can be helpful for consumers to look on those places that do have the calories on their menus, to have a look at how the plant-based products sit alongside other items on the menu in terms of the calorie point of view. And then for food service operators, I'd really encourage them to ask questions about the products, the plant-based products that they're offering. So really think about asking your supplier, how does the product fit in with public health guidelines? Does it meet salt reduction targets? How does it sit with traffic light thresholds? Is it avoiding the red traffic lights? Is it non-HFSS, so not high in fat, sugar and salt? And I also think, remembering that it's not a one size fits all. So depending what the alternative product is, some are naturally going to be a more indulgent dish compared to others. And just a final point that can help both consumers and food service operators is, I think, looking for logos that provide independent certification can be quite a helpful tool. So, for example, you could look for the Rainforest Alliance logo. For seafood, it could be the MSC certification, even Carbon Trust logos. And I think that just helps provide some confidence that it's been independently assessed, and you're likely to be looking at a healthier or more sustainable product.
So very much. We're pretty much at the end, so I just wanted to very quickly say waste. We've had a couple of points coming in about waste, about better use of waste upstream because it generates methane. It's a really challenging one. Just in like 2 sentences brief, maybe you could just tell us about some of the work you've been doing on waste. I know you've had some great work with your potatoes, for example.
Yeah.
So just a real quick one there.
So waste is absolutely crucial in terms of the part of this journey, and we really majored on it in terms of our net zero journey as well, both from an ethical perspective in the society we live in at the moment and the challenges that we're seeing facing population in relation to cost of living. It's not right that food waste is happening at any part of the supply chain, let alone then overlaying the sustainability credentials of the carbon that is and the resources that are being used to produce those things in the first place. So we did some work back in 2019 to reduce our food waste within our potatoes. And what we basically did was stop peeling our potatoes before our fries. So all of our fries now are skin on, which came with 2 benefits. One, we were saving over 350 million worth of potatoes on an annual basis, which is a huge amount of potatoes. And secondly, we actually found the nutritional benefits of that product were far better than removing the skin as well. So it kind of came as twofold. We've been doing that for a long time, but feel passionately that that's the route to continue down and to look at those learnings as to how we can sort of use those in other spaces within our business as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And of course, the measuring and monitoring ongoing is also really, really key. And we need to get everybody in the industry doing that. I wish we had more time. I think this has been so fascinating and I would love to hear more from all of you. If I could have a 1-sentence closing sort of summary, just really short and sweet, starting with Bob, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, for me, it's both a terrifying time, but also a very exciting time. There's a lot of change on the horizon. Some of it quite transformative. We need to collaborate to really make the most of that opportunity. And those that lean into it and collaborate and are at the front end will be the ones who emerge as the winners. So if you're not on the journey, get on the journey and get on it as quickly as you possibly can and work with everyone else as you do it.
Brilliant. Anna?
Yes, absolutely. What Bob is saying, I think what this discussion and your report has really highlighted is just how complex and multi-dimensional sustainable diets is. And so we're not going to achieve our targets and ambitions with just one field of expertise or one group. We really need to collaborate, and that's across government, across customers, suppliers, food manufacturers, and just really work together on this journey. So consider each small step in the right direction part of the bigger picture and a journey in the right direction.
Brilliant. And Ruth?
What Anna and Bob has said, I completely agree with. I think a lot of it's been covered within there. I would go back to the point I sort of made earlier is kind of let's not be stifled by the unknown. Like actually at the moment, you've highlighted a number of places and it comes out very clearly in the report. from a climate and a diets perspective, we're not in a great place. So any progress is better than nothing at all. So let's be working together, and I've mentioned collaboration so many times on this call, but to be making that progress and sort of striving for steps in the right direction.
Thank you all so much for your time and insights. The report is packed full of loads more. Please do download it. Go to the Footprint website, and Nestlé Professional will have it both there. And those who are on the Footprint mailing list will get it out this afternoon as well. But it's got loads more detail in there. But most importantly, please go away, take action, keep working on the sustainable diet space. It's a really, really exciting area for operators and those within the hospitality and food service supply chain to have a really positive, tangible, concrete impact. We really all have the power to make a massive difference. I have so much faith in this whole community, so please continue to do the wonderful work you're doing. Let's all do everything we can to protect our beautiful planet and the health of all the wonderful people that we have the privilege to serve every day, or whenever we do feed them. So yes, thank you very much all for listening. I'm very, very sorry that I went over by a couple of minutes. I hope you'll forgive me, but thank you very, very much, everybody, for joining us today. And I hope you enjoy the report. As always, do contact us with any thoughts and comments. And thank you again to Nestlé Professional for supporting the project. Thank you very much.